pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
She is here.
She had her hand over her heart too. That was good.
Okay. So,
You guys are matching.
Hi. Yeah.
I know I didn't get the memo.
We planned it.
Okay. I had a little.
I'll be in charge
Want me to
today.
mind? Okay, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Member Hurley.
Present.
Member Young.
Present.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith.
Present?
Member Daschle.
Yes.
Chair Lowry.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Okay, first thing we have on this meeting of May 2nd, 2024 is the approval of the agenda. Before we do that, I would ask that the information items that are in 6A and B, if we could put those before the discussion items. And the reason I say that, I think they have, in that talk, some things will become relevant to our discussion items, specifically with the LDC Divisions 20 and 40. And I think it would help clarify if we could do that first. And I can be more specific if you want, or we can just do that unless it's a problem.
Do you need a motion and a second to move?
Well, we'll just be replacing 6 and 5, and the
Yeah.
motion would be, I move to approve the agenda with the change.
Okay, in that regard, I move to approve the agenda with that change.
I'll second.
Member Young.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith.
Yes.
Member Daschle.
Yes.
Member Hurley.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lowry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next is the audience comments. Seeing none, we'll move on from that. Next, we have the approval of minutes. Has anybody, besides myself, I'm sure, had an opportunity to read the minutes from March 7th, 2024? And do we have any motions associated with that?
I'm going to make a motion that we approve the minutes and the workshop and the regular minutes from March 7th of 2024.
I'll second that motion. Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith.
Yes.
Member Daschle.
Yes.
Member Hurley.
Yes.
Member Young.
Yes.
Chair Lowry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next, item 4 is action items, election of officers for the years 2024 to 2025. We have to elect a chair and a vice chair for one term, a one-year term, excuse me. I'm the current chair. Tia is the current vice chair. Anybody wanted to have discussions about anything? I would just say, I've done this. I appreciate you all supporting that. I'd like to continue on only because we're in the middle of this, redoing all this stuff, and I think it's helpful for me, perhaps, to sometimes get information from the city when there's issues that they don't always give out to the whole group. So does anybody want to run for chair or run for vice chair, or how do y'all feel about that? Or how do you want to vote?
I'd be willing to make I'd be willing to make a motion to appoint Bill Lowry as committee chair for 24-25.
I second the motion.
And third. Fourth.
Okay, well, I guess we have to do roll call.
Sure. Member Daschle.
Yes.
Member Hurley.
Yes.
Member Young.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith.
Yes.
Chair Lowry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, for vice chair, Tia, you still want to do this? Anybody else have any interest?
I'd be happy to still do
Okay.
it if someone else wants to take a shot. I'm not sure even, my term, I don't know, has been officially extended, so.
I don't know.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Well, the reality is if there's changes made,
there's changes made, right?
and there's changes made, and we can always re-elect at that point.
Okay, in that case, then I'll make a motion for Tia Hawkinsmith to be the vice chair for 2024, 2025.
I would second that motion.
Member Hurley.
Yes.
Member Young.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hawkinsmith.
Yes.
Member Daschle.
Yes.
Chair Lowry.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Yay.
Didn't have to put up a sign or anything.
Housekeeping out of the way, we're all set.
Yeah. Hi, Tara. Did you hear me a moment ago? We were going to put the information items before the discussion items. I don't know if you heard that, which means, because there's some things in the information items that I think is going to be relevant to our discussion when we get to that. So, you know, bear with us. Okay. All right. Okay, so if we go next, we go to the information items. A is the exclusion of properties east of 19th through 21st Avenue from the Pascagoula Overlay District. And just to remind everybody, we had talked about that, I think, at the last meeting, because on the zoning map, that commercial area there does not have a / Pass a Grill behind it, which definitely was usually is the indicator that the overlay applies. And so we were wondering how or why that wasn't included in the overlay, whether that was a mistake on a zoning map or sometime in history, whether there actually was discussion about that. And I know Brandon found out some information, and so if you'll tell us about that.
So just like you said, staff performed a little bit of research, and I think there might be a little bit of a disconnect between the the purpose of the zoning district, which says all properties south of 32nd are intended to be within the overlay, and what's actually adopted through the zoning map. Back in 2003, when the entire city was rezoned to our current zoning designation, I wasn't able to find the the audio, but I was able to find the minutes. And it was intended to leave out the properties between 19th and 21st. The other properties that are in the, south of 32nd, but not in the overlay, include the fire station and the 2 residential properties that we'll be talking about in item B. Those are also not within the overlay. Those properties were rezoned in 2019, I believe, but they were also not in the overlay prior to that. They went from the institutional zoning to the residential medium. So I just wanted to bring this up. I know it was a point of discussion last month, or 2 months ago, I guess now, and if you had any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Can you tell the board here what the reasoning behind, well, let me just ask this first. So in 2003, when they rezoned everything, at that point, this area between 19th and 21st would have been under the overlay, just by definition that it was south of 32nd Avenue. Is that your understanding?
It was in the overlay back in, I believe, 1999, when the original overlay was adopted. It was in the overlay.
Okay, so in 03, they decided to take it out of the overlay, and I know that went in front of the city commission, and they approved that, right? And what was the reason that was given for that?
There wasn't a reason given. Just from what I found in the minutes, it was intended to be excluded, but I don't know what the reason was.
Well, I thought I read something where you mentioned something because the marina was already 50 feet high or something like that, that the staff recommended that it be excluded. That's something that's...
That might have been in minutes somewhere. I don't remember bringing that up. And that would apply to the marina, but not necessarily to the wharf and what's now Red, White, and Booze. Those
Correct.
fit with the height.
Hold on. I think it was in our packet. I know I read that.
And 8th Avenue was also outside of that also.
Well, not at that time. It was under the overlay until we created the CRD.
Yeah, if you read, I think Brandon did a good job on 223 highlighting some of the minutes. It looks like because what was being proposed was limiting it to 35 feet in height, and the fact that between 19th and 20th, it was the only area in Pass a Grill with a 50-foot height limit, they decided to keep it out for consistency.
Right, that's in the notes here. That's
So
what I read.
that to me would
Looking at it
be
now.
as good of reasoning as we could potentially find, considering these weren't live streamed.
Right. But this is, I mean, this, I'm reading where it says he noted that the only area in Pascagoula with a 50-foot height limit were the 2 blocks on the east side of 19th and 21st. So the proposed zoning was CG1, which also had a 50-foot height limit, and the recommendation was that these 2 half blocks not be included in the overlay district. Okay, so that clarifies that part, because I think next month, whenever we meet again, I think we need to really nail down these zoning maps and get them up to date again, so we need to know why each is what it is. And the concern I have, I understand why it was taken out of the overlay, or what the reasoning was behind it. But you know, there's other buildings on Paso Grill that are over 50 feet that aren't taken out of the overlay. You know, the Hurricane, the condos down there between 4th and 5th. And I think that might be relevant later when we talk with Tara about certain stuff, as how we need to think about that, okay? And I would also point out, and I don't know the answer to this, but it is where Red, White, and Booze is and the wharf is, those are, I imagine, historic structures. I mean, you know, if they've been, I know they're in a historic district. And see, that's the next overlying issue we got to talk about, okay? Because the historic overlay only applies to those parts that the map says they're part of. So that commercial zone that is right now, which is not part of the overlay, it's still part of the historic district. So how do we deal with that? Do we need to create a new zone like we have on 8th Avenue, where we deal with that specific issue of, because, you know, half that property has historic homes on it that are only 1 story high. Another one has a marina. Of course, the marina is a great thing to have. And, you know, can we grandfather that? Here, again, that area is kind of in the heart of Paso Grill, right at the intersection of Vina, where the traffic light is. And do we really want to remove that from the overlay? Okay, we see why they did, but do we want to essentially remove it from the historic district? Because is there any language, and I think there might be, in the historic, in creating the historic district that allows us, the historic board, to look at that property between 19th and 21st?
And maybe upon change of use, it would be subject to overlay.
And, I'm just posing this as we talk forward, because, you know, as Brandon said, the only other areas at the last zoning map that I've seen, because they haven't updated it in a while, the only 2 areas that were not, excuse me, there was 3 areas that weren't under the / overlay. The CG area there between 19th and 21st, which we just talked about. The fire station, which is institutional. However, the church is zoned institutional and it's under the overlay. Okay? The yacht club and the women's club is zoned institutional, but is under the overlay. So how did the fire station, when was the decision made that the fire station didn't apply to the overlay? Which we may have to do some homework on that, because that essentially leads us into the last piece of property that wasn't in the overlay, was where PMI was. That was institutional, but it wasn't under the overlay. And I don't know why not when it's south of 32nd. And then, of course, what happened, and Brandon will get, that's the next thing coming up, is that was rezoned as RM, but not / overlay, even though it was south of 32nd. And so that property can be built differently than anything else on Paso Grill, even though it's in the historic district.
You're talking about PMI?
Yep. That's now under RM, not RM / PAG, even though the cross the street is RM / PAG, and the very end of Paso Grill is RM / PAG. So I'm trying to find out or figure out why a lot was taken out of the overlay or out of the historic district, and I don't think the historic board was brought in on that. At least I have no memory of that. I talked to Chair Monroe, and he had no memory of that because he was there longer. Sean, do you remember then?
No. It's always been zoned as institutional, was always outside the overlay, but I don't know why.
I know, but when they rezoned it as residential, it didn't become under the overlay like the property across the street. It became a residential, it has different rules. It
Yeah,
can
but
be,
it could have been, so when you're talking about rezones, there's city issued, initiated rezones, and then there's also private property initiated rezones.
well, that was a private property issue.
Then
so.
they asked for what they wanted, and that's what they got.
Yes, my question is,
So if they didn't say, I want to be rezoned to overlay, then that's.
so anybody can do that?
You can rezone a property, absolutely.
Without the historic board knowing about it? Even though we're supposed to be in charge of the historic district? So people could just take it out of the overlay if they want?
Actually, I thought we could only rezone to what a neighboring property was.
It
So if the
depends.
neighboring property is RMPAG, then it should have gone that way.
It's not just neighboring property, it also depends on the future land use map. So for example, in other, it does.
I believe you, but
In other cities, for example, they may have, because future land use map, you have to assume you're thinking 20 years out. So there may be a strictly institutional or residential area that the city planners have said, okay, in 20 years, we want this to be a commercial corridor. So the future land use map will have it zoned commercial, even though it sits right now institutional and nothing around it is commercial.
okay, I get that.
Someone can come in, a private property owner, and rezone that before the city does to commercial, because they've already anticipated that it will be commercial in the future.
Okay, well, that's not what we have here. Okay, what we have is an area that's totally south of 32nd Avenue, which therefore is in the historic district and is in the overlay. Okay? And as institutional, it was not in the overlay. Why? I don't know. Every other institutional was in the overlay. So I think we need to find out why that wasn't put in the overlay to start off with. Because as Tara said the last meeting, the understanding was everything south of 30, it's in the overlay unless it's excluded. We know the reason why some of this stuff is excluded. I don't know why why the institutional was excluded from the overlay. My point is when they came in to get it rezoned to residential, everything south of 32nd zoned residential has the overlay. This one didn't. So now they're allowed to build something, and already in the process of building something that couldn't have been built south of 32nd. Unless, was that information given to the city commission that you were now removing part of the historic area? We're spot zoning this? Was it brought to the historic board's attention that, hey, we're talking about rezoning this out of the overlay even though it's south of 32nd? I don't think they did. And so now the owners of that property, they got bigger value for their property because they can build a bigger house. And so now south of 32nd, we have new houses that are built bigger than anything else around there.
I understand.
So my point is, I don't know the answer to that, but I point that out to show you what can happen. And once again, another instance where historic board is not brought into something. And if we had been brought into that, gotten that information, we might have been able to point out to the commission, this is south of 32nd. It's supposed to be in the overlay. It's residential. Why should these people get a special consideration and increase the value of their property, which is inconsistent with the rest of Paso Grill?
So are you saying there's no residential medium zone properties south of 32nd?
There are, but there's /PAG.
Yeah, but everyone has the choice. They're not, the person that only has residential medium can build to the residential medium just like any other property south of 32nd, because you can pick whether you want to build
Yeah,
to
but you're still limited in height. The overlay, everything is a height differential.
I understand. I don't know how many of these questions we can answer, but I'll try.
No, no, I'm just pointing out an issue that we need to think about when we go forward. If you're under the /overlay, okay, then you've got to abide by the height regulations of the overlay.
If you choose to.
No. It's zoned under the overlay. It's zoned under the overlay. It's /PAG, so it's zoned under the overlay. I mean, Brandon can answer that question for us.
So let me ask this, Brandon, if you know the answer. If my property is a single-family home and I am zoned residential medium / Paso Grill overlay, and I decide to build my home to residential medium, do any height restrictions in the overlay apply to my property?
Yeah, anything in the overlay has to comply with the height limitation in the overlay, whether or not they build to the underlying or the overlay. That's the one element that defers to the overlay in all cases.
Okay.
So for the residential medium, like Chair Lowry mentioned, they do by being outside the overlay, I think they pick up 3 additional feet in height that wouldn't be allowed if they were in the overlay.
If it was a property initiated, then there would be records of it.
Well,
But I'm assuming it was, because I don't remember doing any.
they're already building the houses. It's spilt milk at this point. I'm not trying to cry over it. I'm trying to show how it's important we tighten up all this stuff as far as the maps goes and how they get used, and also how the historic board should be brought in on anything on Paso Grill of any nature should be brought in front of us. Because that, in my opinion, my guess is I don't think the historic board didn't know about it, and I don't think the commissioners probably knew what they were doing when they voted, I guess, to make it RM without / Paso Grill overlay. Why do you take a piece of property and give those people an advantage over everybody else? And as you see, when you look at for informational purpose, look at the houses, they're basically 4 stories, which is inconsistent with Paso Grill. So, anyway, I didn't want to dominate. I'm just saying that's a real issue that I think we need to talk about how we're going to look at some of this other stuff. Because, things happen all the time. Excess docks are built, things of that nature. And it seems like sometimes, the gatekeepers, this is not to Brandon, but people, we have turnover a lot. We make mistakes. And then by the time, so I'm going to say again, like I said every month, if it's something in Paso Grill, we should be told about it. And especially if you read at the division about the establishment of the historical board, it says we shall get information on every building permit in the historic district. We've talked about that before. Does that mean if you want to change your light sockets? No, but certainly if you're going to build a house, we ought to be able to know what's going on before they start breaking ground. So, there's no going back on this. I'm sure they're already in the ground and building, and have been for months. And the resolution we had the other day, I know there's been basically an agreement that the city would show us things on Paso Grill that weren't necessarily into the overlay. But doesn't the resolution cover that as well too? Didn't we basically say that in that? If you remember, I just don't remember.
Say what specifically?
That like new houses being built on Paso Grill, even if they're built under the underlying zone, they're going to show it to us for information purposes.
I could have sworn there was an informational aspect, but
Yeah, that's what's on the agenda.
I would need to.
Yeah, but that's why it's on the agenda. That's what except for as I've said before, the time between getting a permit and the time of digging a ditch is usually months, and I do not think the board has to wait till they start building the building before we find out what the plans are. Because if we had seen these plans before, before they made it, we could have said, hey, how did this get rezoned this way? Did everybody know that they were removing this from the overlay? And these 2 houses get special consideration that nobody else is getting? How did that happen? Who voted for this? What information was given to these people? Because it's clearly south of 32nd. No question it's south of 32nd. Are we going to start just, if the fire station decides we're not going to build a fire station, we're going to build a 4-story house there? Does that just happen without the board knowing what's going on? So I think we got, I'm a little suspicious about the information that was given and how it happened. And I point that out again to say, as we move forward, we've got to consider those kind of things and tightening up these zoning maps and knowing what we're going to do 10 or 15 years from now. And that's why I think this commercial area that we talked about, when it gets removed 20 years ago from the overlay, everyone just forgets about it because nothing's been built on there But there's historic structures on there. How are we going to deal with that if someone decides they want to, for example, joinder of lots, all right? Is there anything that brings the historic board on joinder of lots that isn't in the overlay, that gives us authority for something that's not in the overlay? Does it give us authority in a historic district? Well, then you got to look at the language of the historic districts to talk about joinder of lots in the historic district. If somebody wants to come in there and buy between 19th and 21, what's going to stop them from putting up a huge 60-foot condo along the whole waterfront there? That's, things that can potentially happen. And so we've got to keep that in mind when we start thinking about how we do these things. And, I'm suggesting, not for today, but for future discussion, we talk about making a special zone for that commercial area, just like we made a special zone for 8th Avenue. And so in that regard, for next month's meeting, I would like to have a discussion item about, and Tara, maybe you can help with us that too, is how we might create a new, zone for that commercial area. Everything across the street from it that's commercial is zoned ROR/PAG. So it's just that one area right there. And then the fire station, and now what was PMI, but is now RM without /PAG.
So would you be looking to have the PAG extend, because we do have commercial standards in the PAG. I know this board hasn't seen any developments yet, but there are structures that would be subject to the same design review. Would you like to see the PAG extended to the east side, or would you like an overlay?
Yes, but then if we do, of course I would, and that would be the simplest thing, but then that affects the height, right?
It would.
Yeah, so we can talk about that and see where that gets us, but,
I mean, the original intent of the PAG overlay was to include those areas. So the design criteria, excluding the height, would all meet that. It would be a preference to keep that and just expand the boundary, and you could address a height or allow that. Those areas where the height was in the commercial, when I originally did a little bit of design for those areas, I don't think they could yield the height and meet parking. So that's, in some ways, that was a concern that I had, was, having the 50 foot and then having that taken away. But I don't know design-wise if you can even yield it.
There's other content involved in that, and that is that parcels are owned on both sides of the street, and therefore the parking wasn't really an issue. It would be solved by owning both sides of the street. So we need to probably take that out of the equation in some fashion, because the reality is they would combine those two blocks together, and then they would take over the commercial on the opposite side of the street, which is owned by those same property holders, and that would solve all their problems for.
Yeah, it has to go through your process, though, if they combine the lot.
not if they're not in the
Not if
overlay.
it's outside.
No, I know, but I'm saying if it just goes into the overlay.
Yeah, right, and that's what, I'll bring that up later when we talk about the changes we talk about we have to be cognizant that what we're gonna be talking about later, and what you've done is only overlay, and if it's removed from the overlay, then we have, it has to be somewhere else if we're gonna be, design criterias don't apply, height requirements don't apply. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up and talk about it now before we just suddenly burst onto that later on.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the conversation. I do think that the goal today, at least for the code, is to be okay with those standards, and then I look at it as a separate discussion. That, what are we going to do about the areas that are outside of it? But I don't think it influences the code that you have in front of you, the two divisions.
I don't either.
We're not.
I'm sorry, I don't either. I just wanted to bring it up now, so when we talk about the code in a minute, we'll understand there's things down the line that will make more sense we may have to deal with.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yep.
Okay, well, with that, anybody else have any comment, but as far as the informational items, I guess we talked about the exclusion. Does anybody want to have conversation about the new residences in that area I was talking about at 3101 and 3105? I do have these questions. So those houses are, what is their highest height on those? If you know. Sorry to Brandon. Appreciate it. And by the way, I'd like to say I think one of them in particular is a very nice design. And the other ones are pretty nice too. So it's not the I have to applaud the owners that they've made them look past a girl alike, in a way. So it's not that issue as opposed to that they're not under the overlay.
So looking from grade to the highest point of the roof, the ridge of the roof, they are about 49 feet. That's 5 feet taller than what would be allowed under the base zoning, and it's variable because the overlay affects the pitch of the roof, so it's gonna affect the height, but it's probably about, I'd say, 6 or 7 feet taller than what it could be built under the overlay.
And also, it's my understanding, without the overlay too, that they are allowed to do a Class B dock, a commercial dock there as well, which you can't do in regular Passacro.
That would go with the upland use, so they would be limited to residential docks, so that the 2 slips.
And what does FAR mean? I know it's different when you're not in the overlay.
That's floor area ratio. It typically doesn't apply to residential, but that would be the square footage of the enclosed portion of the building.
Okay.
It's permitted.
And do you agree with me basically those are 4-story structures?
Yeah, with the walkout and the top, you have the ground parking and then 3 levels.
Yeah, okay.
I did want to say, because you brought it up earlier, these are the only residential properties south of 32nd that I'm aware of that would be able to exceed that height limit. The only times that the city, since I think it was 2007 when the institutional and these properties were taken out of the overlay, since then the only zoning out of the overlay has been to CRD 8th Avenue. We've had a few on 7th and on 9th that have been rezoned into the CRDEA. But we haven't had any zonings out of the overlay since then, so.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and I guess I don't have to have the answer for this, but since everything was supposed to be under the overlay, and you gave the reasoning for why they took the commercial area out there, but somewhere out there there's a reason, or there wasn't a reason, why the fire station and PMI are excluded. Because I said, other institutional things were under the overlay.
Yeah, we've narrowed down the time. I mean, we can look up when it was done. It would have been by ordinance, so I'll have that information for next month.
All right, anybody have any questions about those informational, the information on the 2 homes being built? Okay, I guess not. So we can go to discussion items. And that's the Land Development Code Divisions 20 and 40 for draft review. And Terry, you want to take over now? Thank you, Brandon. Oh.
Not really. Of course.
Please, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tara Salmeri. So before you is the next iteration of Division 40 and Division 20. The first couple of pages has just been kind of the running tally of what's been updated and changed. You as a board have already looked at the majority of these changes. The ones that are highlighted in gray are as a result of discussions that we had in, I think, one of the last workshops. The one, it might have been in November. We had some discussion, so I just wanted to update the table and address. So if you look at the summary, it'll tell you in a gray highlight what sections got updated. They were all updated as a result of the discussion. So if you'd like, I can just give you a high-level review. I don't know if we necessarily want to go page by page, or if you want, do you want me to call out that page and then you can look at it for yourself, or what would you like?
Well, of course, I'll be a pain here. I'd like us to go through it because this is the last time we really do this until we go to a workshop with the city commissioners and explain this to them. Is that correct? Is that your
I mean, that's the goal, but
yeah.
You have some issue with that.
No. I don't have any issue at all, but for example, I think might be a couple typos in there and things of that nature that I think we probably should clean it up. I mean, we don't have to read it out, but we should go to each one and say, section 2001, purpose and intent, how do people feel about that? Is there any issues or anything we got to take care of? I don't think it'll take too long, honestly.
Well, respectfully, I do.
Okay.
I think that's going to take too long. What I would say is can we just address what the changes are, and if there's scriveners or some other issues, we'll go through that again. Okay. I just want to be respectful of the time. We're going to go through 58 pages, line by line, every single section, and then try to get through the CRDEA.
Okay. I'll back off that. I mean, I have a few notes. I'll just point them out if I see it.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay. All right, so we're going to just go through section 20.01. That starts on page 1 of Division 20. And there's just been a comment that it was either Paso Grill Overlay District or Paso Grill Historic Overlay, and to be consistent, instead of spelling that all out, this Paso Grill Historic Overlay District, it'll be referred to as PAGHOD. And that is the very first paragraph. There was also some discussion on adding historic contributing structures to the language, and that is mid-paragraph, where it starts with compatible with the character of existing historic contributing structures. So that was the other request, and that's been updated. If you head to page 4, in 4, this is going to be a discussion that we have had with staff, and then also some of the questions that have come up in 2007. This original paragraph, it will say the last sentence in that paragraph, in addition, any new construction cannot exceed the existing developed square footage. We're updating that to livable developed square footage. It was never an intent that it would be non-habitable space, so we're clarifying that that's the livable space that cannot be exceeded. 2007D, as in David, I had counsel, and I've updated those to commission. It's the very last part of the sentence on D. And page 5 is section 20.10, the reduced setbacks for contributing structures. We updated the table of front yard to have a footnote instead of the 10 feet. And the footnote reads not to exceed more than 3 feet of a variation from the average historic setback as described above. So we're allowing that variation. We've set that benchmark as the board requested. And the only other little small things that changed that I did not highlight that I'll just kind of go through too is, or maybe we had done it before, but section 20.14, it used to say vacant parcels. It had lot split, assembly of parcels, but we added vacation of easements and our right-of-ways because that was a discussion to include all of that. So that section number has been updated to read to that.
On 20.14, and also, can I just say, just because I know it's here, in 2011, 20.11, is there a typo? I mean, just that sentence says, even if the first blue sentence, even if the parcel does not meet the minimum lot width depth standards and can meet the setback requirements. Does that mean it's not supposed to be cannot meet the setback requirements?
No, what it is that it's deemed conforming if the lot width and depth is not a minimum standard. That's okay as long as they can meet the setback requirements.
Okay, thank you. I'm just confused. All right. And on 2014, which I don't have any problem with any of that, but that goes to the argument I was just talking about, or the discussion I was having before about this assembly of lots, vacation of easements, all that kind of stuff only applies to right-of-way stuff. So it's not going to apply to anything that's in that commercial area as we talk right now.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay.
we,
I just want the board to be aware of that. That it's not taking care of everything in the historic district, it only takes care of what's in the overlay.
And 8th and 9th, yes, CRD and the overlay.
Right.
And, yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're correct. And then the only other item that was updated is at the end during the general building design standards. I had the design guidebook as part of the submittal requirements, but it really should have been in just a different section. So I've moved it to the appropriate sections, which are 2022 general building design residential. You'll see at the after pool location, there's the design guidebook, and then all of the text and language about the design guidebook is now housed there. There has not been a change. And then 2023 also has the same reference to design guidebook. And then 2024 design review and required drawings. I added just a sentence on identifying through the use of the design guidebook how the proposed project is meeting the intent of the district. So that's just tying together the soon-to-be developed design guidebook, what that guidebook's role is, and then to have the applicant also have to show how they're doing that. And that is it for that division, the division 20.
Okay, I got a couple
Unless
questions.
there,
Yeah, sorry, of course. And first off, I applaud what you did. I loved how you added those things about design guidebook and the additional language you did about the historic character and all that kind of stuff. It's really good. I have a question though. On page 23 of the 48, where it talks building height and it says underlying zoning district, shouldn't that really say, shouldn't that have that it's the overlay information?
yeah,
Okay.
yes, it should.
Okay, and the same on page 25, commercial mixed use, even though I don't even know how many of those really exist. But anyway, that also has the underlying zone. That's just a housekeeping thing, but.
No, thank you for that.
And that's also on page 29.
That's on all building types, right?
Yeah, and single-story commercial buildings small, it says underlying zoning district.
Yeah.
Same as on page 31. I think it just, I can understand how it
Yeah, each house.
happened.
Yeah, it's each building type.
Yeah.
Right? Yep.
And then institutional building, it says on page 33, it says the height is 35. Is that what it is? Is that, Brandon, are you nodding your head? That's what it's supposed to say there? I'm okay with it if that's what it's supposed to say, but I didn't know.
So currently, for non-residential, it's variable. Some defer to the underlying zoning. Some have heights at like institutional. It varies, but 35 is what was intended.
Okay, and I'm really more concerned, since they're talking about building a new fire station, is that going to be enough height for them and stuff, do you know, offhand, with what the drawings they've showed us so far? Don't know. Okay, just pointing that out. So we don't have to.
Well,
They're gonna have a lot of
now
air.
you're pointing that out, though, if, it's that typology is only for permitted and existing institutional buildings, but that's already in there, right? And it's not in your overlay, but, I would prefer to write a footnote in that height that says, maybe increased upon, historic preservation review or something.
That'd be great. I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I think, for example, if the fire station needs to be higher and everybody's happy with what it is, then why would,
They're gonna have to have a lot of variances no matter what they do.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
You typically don't do a variance in height though, do you?
Typically not, no. But they got a lot of setback variances, a lot of other things too,
Okay.
stormwater.
Okay. I'll add something in the institutional. Okay. All right.
I'm just trying to see if yeah, page 41 out of 48, on the building type, 2017, under commercial, it has refer to underlying zoning district. And since we're kind of getting rid of all of that, right? If it's really in the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna do a search that says underlying zoning and then
Okay.
replace. Yeah.
Okay, and then, I love the language in 2018 that you added about using the alleys and things of that nature. Is on page 42 of 48. What I'm concerned about is, it says there under C1, parcels abutting an alley of at least 15 feet. And does anyone know whether the alleys are platted at 15 feet or more? I mean, is that going to ultimately be a problem, or, because there are some alleys now that are almost unusable, and I think that's more because the city hasn't kept up with them. So, but if we make a requirement that new homes have alley access, we want to make sure that they actually can do that. Otherwise, we're going to be in a conundrum. And that could be something we can determine for, when we meet with the commissioners or whatever, for the workshop. Doesn't have to answer today, unless Brandon, you know something.
Right, so generally speaking, I don't know of any alleyways that are easements. I believe every alleyway that hasn't already been vacated is a platted alley at the width that it's maintained. Of course, we have several that are, maybe 15 feet wide, but because of encroachments or 7, 8 usable feet of space. But I don't know of any that are easements. I believe they're all platted alleys.
No, I know about it. They platted it 15 feet. That's what I'm saying.
Not,
I think they're all platted too, but what I'm saying is, are they platted wide enough to meet this criteria?
most of the ones south of 22nd, I believe, are 15. They're platted at 15.
Yeah.
Several of the ones north are 10.
Right, and somewhat, yeah, it's a whole different situation.
So what if it just didn't have the feet and just that it's platted? Is that doable?
The reason why there was feet, and it can be removed, but I'll just tell you the reason. The parcels abutting an alley of at least 15 feet. That was just a criteria to be met that would then state that they could not place parking in the front yard of the zoning lot. So it was giving that specific standard to an alley that had the 15 feet versus alleys that didn't. And if they didn't have that, then the allowance to park in front would be able to occur.
Okay.
Okay, I get that, but, and there is a distinct difference in the neighborhoods south of 22nd and north of 22nd, and the way the alleys and the way the house was originally built and things of that nature. So it may not be that practical of a problem, but what we don't want, I suppose, we want to make sure people use their alleys if they have them, and not have us curb cut in the front and waste. Not only do they put a car in the front yard and a garage in the front yard, but they take another parking space away from street parking. And so are we making a standard here that's impossible to meet, so everyone's going to get a curb cut? Or will this, if we say 15 feet, will this put the onus on the city to clear out some of those alleys that have been encroached upon so people can use them? There's probably a few of those out there.
I
And
know
so,
we talked at one time about doing an alley survey or having staff doing an alley survey to see, where the encroachments are, because I know there are some fences that are out inside the alleyways and certainly a lot of.
I believe there's a survey of the alleys going on right now.
probably is.
There's an actual surveyor out.
But
in the alleys.
the next thing, along that line is that maybe that's all a moot point if they have to come in front of the historic board to get a curb cut on the street. Because before, they don't have to do that. And so the city can just say, oh, you know, yes, you get a curb cut. Yeah, but they got an alley in the back there. Well, so they asked for it, we gave it to them.
We could make that part of the design review then? Is that what you would like to say?
And, but it's nice that, you know, we're telling everybody, you know, most of those old houses do use their alleys south of 22nd. But there's a few that haven't. A lot of the new builds are parking in the front, you know, in the front. And it changes the character of the neighborhood, I think. So, I mean, it's okay just to leave it like this. I think that's fine. But if Brandon would add that to the design review, it would kind of be a insurance that, you know, we're in spirit.
Do you want to have, the parcels without alley access shall be granted a curb cut, so that's in it. You know, it could be a review. I could add a sentence in that C1 about any curb cuts. Well, no, that's clear. I know what you're saying. I didn't know if I should put like a sentence in on that curb cuts.
Now, here's how we get around it, Tara. You remove the 15 feet, and then you add the part about the design review. Okay, so basically what you've got there, parcels abutting an alley, okay, have to go in the back, and you know, and if they can't, they have to go do a design review, and then under C.
Jennifer had suggested too. Yeah, we can just remove that.
The 15 feet and add the part about design review under C1.
Parcels abutting an alley shall not place parking in the front yard of the zoning lot, nor be provided driveway access to the primary street. Just be done with it.
Okay.
Yep, and then they can come in for a variance request to prove that they can't have a gun, and then at that time, then that would kind of signal that the city, that would be a hardship for an applicant stating that they didn't self-create that. So if the alley's not usable, then the city would have to be reviewing it and determining if they're going to make it accessible, or are you granting a variance because it can't be done.
Right, I agree with that entirely. I just want to make sure that kind of request we get to know about. That's all I'm saying. So, okay, I think we're good on that. All right.
Okay.
And also on 2019 alleys and driveway, and this is probably not necessary, but under E 1 and 2, when we're talking about circular driveways or more than one alley, I guess, or more than one driveway, and we talk about what you have to do, is that something that would we would get access to, that we would be able to review? Or is that something, Brandon, you could just say we're going to start doing that? Because what I'm concerned about, and I'm always concerned about, is the city making decisions about things in the historic district without taking the historic district into its, you know, informational circle. I mean, would that need a certificate of appropriateness to do something like that, or, you know?
To do what?
To do a circular driveway, right? I mean, the reality is probably not too many that can actually even occur, right?
No, not based on what's currently drafted. If it were to be proposed for a new home, you would see it as part of the design review. But if an existing property were to just apply for a circular driveway, you would not currently see that.
Right.
So.
The lots are mostly so small that no one would want a circuit that's a hairpin turn, unless they're on a corner, and they could have a curb cut on one side and one on the other side for a corner.
Well, is that something that should we add some language that needs to be reviewed by the historic board? In the case it comes up, I'm just, you know, trying to foresee about any potential problems.
What exactly would you review it against, and what would your determination be to support or not support it?
Well, would it fit into the surrounding neighborhood? would it fit into, would it affect the character of the mass and scale around, all those things that, have something that we're supposed to kind of be paying attention to?
Is it a driveway that accesses a garage, or is it a driveway that just accommodates more off-street parking?
It doesn't distinguish between the two.
Right. And so all I'm saying is, what's the harm in that being something that just gets brought in front of us?
It's another step
I know.
for the applicant, and at the end of the day, they could still do it.
Why? How could they do it at the end of the day?
You are advising them that unless we have something in here that.
Okay.
that- That's what Tara was saying. What are you going on to be able to do a review? What are you basing a decision on?
Well, I'm going to say this goes back to what we talked about earlier, just a minute ago, when that institution was rezoned not being under the overlay, that if the historic board was able to give advice on that, I bet they wouldn't have done that. And so the problem is a lot of the decisions being made are being made by people that don't know the historic district. And the historic district is supposed to be, we supposedly exist to protect that. And so I think, we can say, well, you can give the advice and the city commission can do whatever they want. Yeah, sure they can, but we're supposed to be able to give them information. If they're making decisions without the right information, then whose fault's that?
Then they can make just a more thoughtful decision.
Yeah, or the.
What I would recommend is, well, first of all, the circular driveway I don't think goes to the commissions. So I want to be sensitive to just the process for an applicant if there's a need of a circular driveway. I would say, so here's what I would say, is item 1, overall landscape plan. I don't believe that you as a historic board need to determine and review if the overall landscape plan is not being met. I don't think a circular driveway is going to change the mass and scale of something. But what I would say is in item 2, the impact to the landscape and elevated building criteria, if that needs to be reduced, then the justification shall be provided that demonstrates a need for the driveway. The priority would be transportation circulation. So I think 2, if you're in 1, you should be okay, and 2, go to the board for review. And then you can look at the elevated building criteria, see what's being reduced, determine whether or not it's justified for it. Overall landscape plan and the screening, if it's already met, I think that's kind of I think that's overreach.
I agree, and as I look closely at my notes, I actually wrote that note next to number 2 and not 1.
Okay.
So.
So how about determined by the city and reviewed by the HP board for 2? Because I could see if the elevated building criteria has to be reduced, I do think that you should take a look at it. And I don't think if it's an impact to the landscape, depending on if it's a total removal, then I think you should look at that too. So I think if it's just stuck to 2, you'd be fine, wouldn't you?
Yes. And that was my last comment on section 20.
And you said you had another comment?
No, that's it. No, that's the only comments I had on section 20.
It's done for the day. Oh.
No,
We're not done for the day, we still got 40.
Later. No.
There's 10 of 11.
And review.
And for the record, it's only been 59 minutes that we've been meeting so far.
You took the first 30-something doing something that I wasn't involved in, but
yes, I was.
It was helpful to listen to. Okay, so anyone else on the PAG HOD? Because then we can move to the CRDEA.
One thing, sorry, the design guidebook. So that's something we're going to have to put together. Is it your belief we would put that together before we present it to the workshop for the city commission?
No.
Okay, but we'd have to have it before we actually had a vote on this by the city commission, right?
We could, yeah.
And then as we're talking,
I don't think
It
so.
would be a sample?
Oh,
Depend.
You can just add it, kinda?
Well, if we're doing what I think Tara and I have discussed, we're referencing a design book that we will craft, just like our code references and employee handbook.
Okay, perfect. So,
I mean, if you're worried about timing, that could take, I don't know, a year.
yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying is that's something we can add later on.
Yes, that's why we're referencing it.
Correct.
Because you didn't want, well, yeah.
You don't have to explain, I'm fine.
It's going to be separate, and then we can workshop that, and I think that's probably what's going to take a lot of time, because it's just going to be photos, and
Yeah.
that's super subjective, but yeah. Because if we present all of that, everybody's going to get in the weeds, and really the regulatory is the most important. I mean, in this process, not at the end. It's just as important to have it, but not to amend the code. Okay, so are we ready to move on to Division 40?
I think so.
Okay, so Division 40, I added purpose and intent to be pretty consistent with the Division 20. So that's been updated. It's on page 1.
One comment.
I added.
One
Yep.
comment, I like all that stuff at the very end, when you say within the district, that's the only time the word district is used, I think. Can we maybe put within the CRD EA district, just so we're clarifying that it's not the historic district or whatever?
Okay. All right, so then we're gonna come to 48, which is page 3. Is it page 3?
Yeah.
Let me see if I got this. Oh yeah, 48, building height. Height shall not exceed 35 feet, which includes the base flood elevation. I said 40 on the form, so I think I need to update that to 40. That's what you as a board, I remember, discussed, right?
I can't remember now, I know I saw the difference between the two, and I don't know if we settled on 35.
I thought we settled on 35 as a maximum based on the way of the original CRD EA.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I think it's,
Jen was then
I'll update the chart to be right.
yeah, the charts, this is right. And can we go, I'm sorry, but just one thing again, back to 40 on page 2 of the 7, on 40.4, allowable conditions in use and structure. And I apologize, but I was a lawyer and I had to take apart ordinances and statutes all the time and look for things that were essentially inconsistent. But so 4004 also addresses rooftop uses, okay? But we've got that as subsection B, all right? And in subsection A, 2, that gives the Historic Preservation Board approving the request, but B doesn't have that Historic Board being involved. And that's going to be potentially a hot topic in the future about rooftop dining and drinking and stuff. And so I'm wondering whether that should also have, just like we have A2, we should have B2. You follow what I'm saying? That how A2 applies to the designation as historic and the Historic Preservation Board approves the request. And so why can't we have B also have a subsection? In that case, it would be 1, but it says the same thing as A2. So the Historic Board, because the way this reads, I would say the Historic Board is cut out of being involved in rooftop dining, having any information or any input on that.
I would agree.
Would you want to include outdoor dining, not just rooftop?
Well, can I ask, isn't rooftop dining in another section of the code?
Yes.
Which code, though?
It's
not in this section,
No.
right?
It's like
So there's a subject to
citywide.
criteria in a different section outside of the CRDE.
Citywide.
A.
Yeah, it would be outside of it.
No, but it's a citywide restriction.
Okay.
Is that section 6 point, no, never mind,
Okay.
6.6.24?
Yeah, it's a conditional use permit.
Right.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, you can add it. That.
There's no point.
Sorry, I just read it because
Sure, there's a
it's
point,
not-
because that you don't, the point is, we would have to know what's going on. We wouldn't have to know what's going on if they just put it through the other part of the city.
All conditional use permit, I mean, I'm just saying there's a citywide, you can't just have outdoor music.
I get that.
You'd have to go through a process, conditional use permit,
Okay, so let's say.
which is
someone-
a city commission public hearing in which, as a board, you can show up and speak.
Well, how do we know it?
We can't add to the CUP process.
That's not what I'm saying.
No, but it doesn't hurt to be redundant in that this too comes before the board.
Well, something you,
But it won't,
that's what I'm saying. Well, why shouldn't it be? It's in the historic district.
because we can't just add to the, you'd have to amend Division 4 as well. You're talking about amending multiple sections. You can't just say any CUP in the historic district must be reviewed by the board.
Okay, no. What I'm saying is, you're looking at, I understand what you're saying, you're looking at it as a condition precedent. That the board, we would have to look at it first before anything else could happen.
Correct.
Okay? And I'm saying that we should be able, if you even want to say review for advice, because what happens sometimes is we don't even know about it until it's already done. So yeah, we can come speak.
An issue, if I may, and we might just need to take, I don't know how the conditional uses are done. And what I'm hearing Matthew say is, I mean, because that's a quasi judicial action and it's spelled out what, and who is part of that process, and the board, HPB board is not part of that. I don't know legally how that can play out, so I'm not prepared to say yes or no at this point. I understand what you're saying. I'm just, with a conditional use permit, because there is a process, I don't know if it could just be an information that you're alerted to it, but you know, that's something that I defer to Matthew on,
Yeah.
whether or not that's okay to
Okay, let me propose
be
it a
part of the
little.
process, because that's a, you know.
Not only that,
Yeah.
we have statutory requirements.
Let me propose it a little bit different. So let's say we don't do that, but I have this resolution, how you're telling us about stuff that you don't really have to tell us about, just because the
Not me.
city. Well, you know what, you follow.
Yeah.
You forget what I'm saying. If we include that as just, even if it's for informational purposes, again, if it's something in Pass a Grill, I don't understand the difficulty from the staff point of view, if involving something in the historic district that is something like rooftop dining, which people are going to have strong feelings about, why we just don't get in the loop.
Because to some extent, and I obviously mean this respectfully,
Well,
you guys are also citizens of the city. There's advertisement all over the property that says public notice. There's a public meeting in which you can come speak at.
Yes.
And if I may finish,
I'm sorry.
there is a 180-day shot clock in the statute in which from the moment they apply, we have to have a decision made, which means staff has 6 months from when they get an application to process it, work through conditions, and get it ready for a public hearing. I can't guarantee that within that 180 days, we can find time for the HPP to hear it.
Okay, I get that, but then how does that reconcile with our duties to preserve and protect and all this stuff, the integrity of the historic district? If we don't know, and to give advice. So how does that?
You gotta speak, you gotta speak to your commissioners.
Yes. Okay.
You got to, I can't control
no,
what the
I
commission
understand.
sends to you.
No, I understand that point, but my point is what I'm saying is, as board members, we're supposed to do certain things, and the city and the staff is supposed to help us do that, according to some of these statutes in here, okay? And so my point is, if we're supposed to be able to give advice, why do we have to give it as citizens as opposed to giving it as the board?
Because the reality is unless the commission wants your advice, sometimes they don't feel like they need it. And I hate to put it that way,
I
but
get, and then we have things like it just happened.
but I
up
can't
there
just
at institutional
require
area.
that you give advice if respectfully the commission doesn't seem like they want it or need it to make
Okay.
a decision.
All right, well, I think that that's part of the problems we've had all along when decisions get made, like on the alleys and stuff, that create a bigger problem for the city afterwards.
I understand. There's only limitations, and if this language is put in there and I get a question, I'm going to say the same thing I said to you. I just want everyone to be on the same page.
I just said I would back off that,
There's a shot
having
clock.
add anything and just say, would that be just something that for informational purposes, because it's a pass-a-grill issue, it's a historic district issue that the city is aware of that involves something, not just like changing a light socket, that we
I
might.
mean, Red, White, and Booze applied for outdoor music, and that didn't come to you.
I know.
But we had 45 people show up from Paso Grow.
You're darn right, and
So
the- and
a
Look at the
public hearing
meeting.
like that, a public hearing notice is posted, and one of us sees it and says, hey, we should talk about this, we can't, unless we're here.
The problem is
point.
well, not only can you not because you're here, but it's also a quasi-judicial proceeding in which the record is the meeting. So I can't have a different board talking about this item without both parties present, AKA the applicant here as well.
Court report.
And you got, it's bigger than just go ahead and review
All
this.
right,
There's also an appealable record that we have to
I
create.
see your point.
So if one of us were to show up at a public hearing and say, I'm Tia Hopkins-Smith, Vice Chair of the Historic Preservation Board, this is my opinion, and I would like to see this and other applications like this come before the Historic Preservation Board.
You can do that. And to go a
And
step
that
further,
may carry some weight.
if you're appealing enough, I mean, to be honest, in the commission, they can make a condition of their approval that the HPB has to review it. And that, to me, is legally sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the best. I mean, when it becomes a quasi-judicial matter, it has to, it's gonna get really complicated unless the commission directs that as a condition. I 100% agree with Matthew on that.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Conditional use
You
is
don't have
just
to shut up.
dangerous without having
You don't have to shut up.
complete direction. And as a board, for you all to discuss it becomes a problem.
Tara, I think we can move along. I think Matthew gave good advice,
Okay.
so. And you
All right,
too.
good.
And you too.
Every
Okay,
now
so
and then I get lucky.
on 4013, I did the exact same language on the assembly of or lot split of a parcel, vacation of easements, right-of-ways, and I'm seeing some little spacing issues there. But so that's the same. That got added. 4014. D as in David, building facade, you all wanted to say that that arcades were a preferred design feature, so I added that. And the narrative on the design guidebook, again, is the same as Division 20 that talks about the design guidebook, and it also that's in 4014. And then also in 4015, the design review and required drawings, it also talks about the identifying through the use of the design book how the proposed project is meeting the intent of the district. So that to me is, that particular sentence is going to be very helpful when anybody comes to the Historic Preservation Board, that you can ask specifically how they're meeting the intent, and then that'll have to be presented.
Okay, one thing, on page 7 of 7, under C, but the Historic Preservation Board shall review to ensure compatibility with new construction renovations or additions within the PAG overlay district. We should include the CRDEA as well, right? Since it's not in the overlay district.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that same PAG HOD.
That should not say overlay district, it should say within CRDEA district.
Okay,
This is a carryover.
that's all right.
Sure, with that, I am open to any other comments and questions or.
Honestly, Tara, I really think you should start from scratch.
Yeah, let's go. Let's read it line by line. That was a better.
No, I think this is, yeah, we'll help with typos.
Let's start at number. Going out. I wish I could. That's what I need to work on is a little fuzzy like image. If I don't want to answer a question.
Just become a cat.
The only thing, I mean, I think on these two divisions, we're good where we need to be for, you know, getting it ready for the workshop with the commission. Do we have any idea about when we might do that? I know we said this
I was
summer.
actually just trying to think about how we would even coordinate this. So I think definitely a joint workshop, right?
I think for to explain what's going on, we're gonna have
And
to have-
Tara, okay, so,
I'll be present, not in Zoom.
okay. So we kind of a big agenda. I'm mentioning the beach ordinance. Maybe I can mention this as well on 5/14 to the commission during
What
my,
about getting a workshop?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
just say, hey, we've been working on the overlay and,
If I,
because what the clerk will do is send out a doodle poll,
okay.
which is like
Yeah.
everyone picks the date and she picks the one that the most people are available.
Okay.
But we have a lot of, budget and.
No, I understand. And so, and I guess when I was thinking before, I was thinking we might have to get a guidebook by then, but we don't. So that makes it less time.
No, because the guidebook itself.
No, I get it, yeah.
Tara, are you gonna, I mean, I could talk with you offline about, we may need to get another consultant involved as well.
I get it.
Because it's gonna be in my opinion, a kind of a beefy book.
Yeah.
Because they may make changes, right, you guys, and it may change what we put in
Right.
the book itself.
We have a good one to start with, but anyway, so I don't know how much stuff they have to do or how much prep time we need, if any, to do the workshop with them, or if there's any unanswered questions. It doesn't really appear like there is about what we've done here. I would like to have some discussion about, here's where I'm thinking down the road here. Do we want to ultimately present all our issues to the commission? I think we talked about this, or just have them, initially vote on 20 and 40. And then like I said, if we want to make a special zone out of that commercial area there with maybe some different standards so it fits it more into a historic district, do we want to try to get that information to them at the same time of the workshop, or just do that later? Because
Then this is not
Yep.
legal advice, this is just, I would focus on the progress that you've made.
I agree.
Get
Okay.
it over, just like we kind of cherry-picked the resolution out, got it approved rather quickly. I would probably just focus on the Pastor Grow overlay.
Okay.
Because there's gonna be a lot of advertisement that needs to go out, 2
Okay.
public hearings.
Yeah, I got it.
Oh, and
And there's an
we will
election
have a
August.
special election in August,
Sure.
so who you're having your workshop is not necessarily who's going to be deciding.
Approving it. You may have to have multiple workshops.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is this, I guess is.
I would just focus, I would have the workshop be specific to 20 and 40.
Okay, and do you think that's a workshop we could get in the next month or 6 weeks, or? I only understand there's a lot of people that are probably not going to be here at different times during the summer.
Kind of just depends on everyone's availability.
It would be nice to tag it to when we normally have the meeting, because the one commissioner who can't come till later, it's summer. It's not working.
I just know at last meeting, there were like 6 or 7 meetings in May that Wayne mentioned.
Yeah,
like
we have a
neighborhood
lot.
meetings, and so I don't know.
Okay, well,
I think I mention it. They hopefully they say yes, and we issue a doodle poll, and then
Okay.
whatever days available is when we do it.
all right, sounds good.
But I would start it earlier than this
Yeah.
meeting if possible, if everyone's available. I was thinking.
Oh, yeah.
I guess we'll talk with the commission, but I was thinking like, noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock.
That's fine.
Workshops, remember, are not public comment either, so it'll just be kind of you and them.
And so based on what you said, Jennifer, do you think, is it advisable to try to do it in May, June, or July, is what I'm saying?
I think so.
As opposed to after we get new votes, because
Yeah.
then we just have to recreate the wheel, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, because the beach ordinance is picked up too, so I'm gonna be requesting a joint workshop on that. And then we'll just kind of see whatever dates work. I know people usually travel for the summer, but just make sure you respond to the doodle poll.
Okay. I think that's, do we have anything else we need to, I think we went through everything, right? I think I would like for the next meeting, if we can, just, people can have some thoughts about, and that I don't guess includes you, Tara, but just have some thoughts about if we want to try to do some other type of zone for the, just so we start thinking about it, the commercial area there. And I would like to, I have a question about signs, historic signs. I remember how one time we did the Bon Air. And so maybe we can just have a little bit of information on what qualifies for that kind of thing and what people might have to do if they do that independently, or if they've already got a established place, whether that is part of the residence. I just don't know the rules. I had somebody asking me about that.
Well, we have a sign ordinance that we're gonna be,
Well, and that might affect everything. I mean,
it will.
I mean, well, obviously, by making, at least it used to, you could make a sign historic, and you could probably get around the sign ordinance.
I don't know about that. I know
Well,
there's
like the-
legal,
I mean, like the
legal
bond-
non-conforming.
Remember, we hear from when the Bon Air got historic, you know what I'm talking about? You may not have been
No,
here.
I
So,
don't.
you know, the Bon Air has that huge neon.
Well, I do remember, didn't we just grant a variance for the putt-putt? The sign? That was an old sign.
What's
Yeah,
it?
we did, that was for a new sign they were installing.
Yeah, but it was like to keep the same,
The size
just
and.
keep the size just because, so I mean, there's ways to do it. It's just gonna be dependent on, I haven't seen the version of the sign ordinance yet, but I can tell you there will be some kind of, I don't know if it's as specific to historic signs or more of legal non-conforming, but there will be something there.
And the benefit to the Bon Air and other historic signs is that they can be taken down, they can be substantially improved and put back without
Right.
needing to go for a variance. It's effectively a cheaper
Right.
variance, so.
But for example, you probably under the new sign ordinance, you couldn't build that sign. That's my point, you know, so,
Probably.
because it's kind of protected because it's been made historic.
And also, any sign that would be declared historic would have to go through the local historic landmark district, landmark designation.
What would that be?
great point.
Since I asked, we're talking about that now, would that be separate, even if the house or the building is already historic, and the sign that went with it?
It could be attached, it could be related
That'd be part of the
to
application.
the whole
Okay,
property,
well, anyway,
or it could be separate on its own.
all right, just, whatever, maybe we can just add that just to get an update or specific.
So I will say, just generally speaking, resolution was a big deal. This is a huge deal, right? I think you guys need to understand, like, this is a big thing that you guys are initiating, and my advice is to really prepare and focus on this overlay, because it's gonna take a lot to get it over the finish line.
I know.
I know there's a lot of other things to focus on, but if it were me, I would say, okay, we're making some serious changes here, and you should really put 100% of your effort into it.
I agree, and I think the biggest thing is trying to remove the underlying zone. Although it seems that seems to be, to me, a no-brainer. So why have a historic district if you don't have to abide by it, you know? So is this going to be a situation where the staff is going to make a recommendation?
I think the commission's gonna definitely ask questions.
No, but you know how we usually get something that's prepared and it says staff
Staff report,
recommends
I don't
doing
think, I
this or
mean, for the
recommends that.
workshop, I don't, that kinda just depends on timing.
Oh, yeah, not for the workshop. Sure, yeah. Gotcha. Okay, we're prepared.
But Tara will be here in person and she can explain most of it.
Okay. Is there any other thing else on the agenda? I don't think so, is there?
Yeah, Lynn's got,
Oh, sorry, a whole bunch of stuff. Damn it. Can I go now?
it's not the
I'm just
Bill
kidding.
show.
Okay,
Are
sorry.
you done? You can go now.
Tara, you're done, I suppose, though, I
Vice
think.
Chair.
Okay, so 5B, sorry, good
Tara.
job, yeah.
Hi, Tara. You have to stay the whole time.
Hi, Tara.
Well, when you said give 100%, that's what I've been doing today, okay, so, all right.
It is.
Okay, 5B, flood mitigation options for historic buildings. Lynn?
That is very true. So as a CLG, the board is familiar with the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. In 2019, the Secretary of the Interior published additional guidelines for the flood adaptation for rehabilitating historic buildings in a text-only version. And in 2021, those specific guidelines were revised to include diagrams, illustrations, photographs, and text changes. By this time, staff had given the board a couple of PowerPoint presentations, you all may recall, relating to the city's vulnerability to flooding. Today, I'm going to briefly provide you with information regarding St. Pete Beach's overall vulnerability to flooding, kind of as a refresher, and also provide a general overview of the 2021 guidelines for the flood adaptation for historic buildings. Given the length of the publication, which is about 142 pages, I think, thereabouts, and it was attached to your packet for you to browse in your leisure, I will provide you with an overview of these general guidelines today, and then in a follow-up sometime this summer. It could be at the June meeting, but maybe it won't be, depending on what you have on the agenda. But we can follow it up, because what they do is they have developed certain guidelines relating to historic properties, and the historic, and you know, the Secretary of the Interior has endorsed all of these, and they were written by the Secretary of Interior / National Park Service. So we're going to consider this to be one of your training and educational workshops. You may decide to not use it, but you also may decide that you want to. And as you're looking at some of your rules now, you may want to just think about some of these. Today, we're not going to talk about those specifics. We're just going to be giving an overview. Okay, in general, flooding risk has been long a major challenge for many historic properties and communities. That's including St. Pete Beach. Changing weather patterns, stronger hurricanes, extreme weather events, sea level rise, nuisance flooding, king tides, and continuing development in floodplains are some of the causes of flooding. And flooding events are occurring at an increased frequency and magnitude. And you know, we're probably experiencing that here in St. Pete Beach. I know in my neighborhood in St. Petersburg, we're experiencing just that, more and greater flooding, the king tides, nuisance flooding especially, and especially within certain specific areas of the community called repetitive and severe repetitive loss properties. That's tracking of flood-prone areas, some of the most severe. That historic survey that was being done by University of Florida and Pinellas County, and doing some survey work in Bella Vista, is doing this as a three-year phased project. They're doing this in Bella Vista, and they have surveyed close to 150 properties in Bella Vista. They started at the south end and are working up, and they were piggybacking on the survey that we've gotten that's going to be surveying Bella Vista and also the Don Cesar neighborhood, and that is ongoing right now. We'll get into that just in a little bit, in a few minutes. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the vulnerability assessment. I believe 4 of you were on this board when I gave the presentation in May. But Danielle was not. So we have flash flooding in dozens of locations throughout the city. We have king tides, which are astronomical, and they grow worse due to sea level rise. By the way, the highest point, elevation point, pretty much in the city of St. Pete Beach is about 5 feet above sea level. That's not very high. Sea level rise is long-term and accelerating. NOAA's office over in St. Petersburg near Bayboro Harbor has been monitoring and tracking sea level rise in Tampa Bay since the mid-1940s. The last I heard is about 9 inches. It could be a little bit more over what it was now over what it was in the mid-1940s. So that is increasing. And it's giving rise to more and more flooding issues. And when we have severe rains and flooding issues, it makes those floods worse. So storm surge also. Normally that's dry land flooding caused by hurricanes, but an abnormal rise in water generated by storm above the predicted astronomical tide. But even a storm surge, can be impacted by the sea level rise. So these are pictures. Some of them relate to our city. Some of them are just photos from elsewhere, but they include, okay, I think I need a change of glasses. A larger land, excuse me. Water threats nationally would include different things like your king tides, storm surges, wave action. Sometimes it's just high tides coming in and staying. The Don Cesar neighborhood is a prime example of some of this kind of flooding, like the upper middle, where the water comes in, especially where the boat lift is, and it comes every day. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, depending on whether it's high or low tide, but yet they have flooding every day in the streets there. And these are pictures from around St. Pete Beach. And just a few more different types of water threat you can see, especially storm surge, inundation, and water that just, once it comes in, it may stay there for a little while. And efforts to try and take care of some of these problems through different sewer treatment options, for example. And some of the things that it does to the landscape, like beach erosion. And you see a couple of folks on the far left side walking, and they're up to their knees in water. And these just are increasing over time, but increasing in severity and also in frequency. King tide specifically is a combination of a gravitational pull of the moon and the sun on the earth. And when that happens, we get king tides, and king tides are fairly much occurrent in portions of St. Pete Beach. King tide flooding, especially I think in Bella Vista, in one of the severe repetitive loss areas near the entrance of Bella Vista. So just an overview of the flood mitigation options for historic buildings would be this. They really follow the guidelines for renovation for the reviews that we do for our certificates of appropriateness. We go through specific things every time we look at a certificate of appropriateness. But these guidelines build upon that. And the purpose of them is to provide information about how to adapt historic buildings to what would be more resilient to flooding in a manner that will meet the Secretary of Interior standards. And the Secretary of Interior understands that it's going to be something that's going to be a little different, and if it's not applied to historic buildings, if you tried to do that to a building that was not a historic building, it wouldn't fly. It wouldn't pass muster. You would not be able to do that. Resilience in this publication means the capacity of a historic property to withstand and recover from a flooding event. And also, the Secretary of Interior states that they should be used in conjunction with the guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings that are part of the Secretary of Interior standards. And like the guidelines for rehabbing historic buildings, these guidelines are intended to focus primarily on historic buildings and their sites and their settings. This is just a picture of someone coming out of their house, and this is in Miami Beach.
I was going to say,
And-
it's not Brandon, it's the first time.
And
I've
it's
seen
not
it.
raining, and it is a typical day at high tide, or perhaps a king tide, and it's getting worse. So, in general, these treatments are described in the guidelines are a means of preserving historic properties located in flood-prone areas and making them more resilient to flooding hazards. These flood events can be especially damaging to historic buildings and may require greater adaptive treatments. While many of these treatments can be undertaken with minimal efforts on the historic character of a property, some may require more change than would normally be acceptable. Such treatments are generally not appropriate when a historic building does not have a flood risk. The treatment selected should always be one that minimizes changes to the building's historic character. And while many of these treatments can be undertaken with minimal effects on the historic character, some may require more change than would be normally acceptable. Is that a duplicate slide? I think it might have been. So adaptation treatment should reduce the risk of flood damage as much as possible, but should do so without destroying significant historic materials, features, or spaces. The National Park Service, again, has developed these guidelines for adapting historic buildings, and they've gone to specific now, beginning several years ago, where they just said in 2021, some of their directives. And these directives are going to provide us with information concerning ways, methods, and techniques to ensure the preservation and rehabilitation of the historic properties. They're important to, they've used nation's heritage, but nation is also local heritage. We have a National Register Historic District, and it is definitely in a flood-prone area. And there may be things that we should do to consider how to protect them from flooding. The Historic Preservation Board does review pertaining staff reports for COAs now, and this includes the review of those standards that are codified within National Park Service regulations, and they are integral to a COA review. This intent of these standards is to attest in the long-term preservation of a property through the retention of its historic materials and features. And they do encompass the building, site, and setting or related new construction. This is an example of a historic building, the aftermath of a flood, where water swept through the building and an awful lot of damage to the interior and probably the exterior as well. This is a picture from a number of years ago. It is in, I believe it's in Wisconsin, and it's called the Big Flood of 1933. But when I saw that picture, I think that we've had times when 8th Avenue has come close to looking like this. Using the guidelines. Unlike other versions of the guidelines, which are organized principally by material or building feature, the guidelines on flood adaptation are organized by flood adaptation measures. Most common treatments undertaken to create more resilient properties have been included in these guidelines and are described using definitions provided by FEMA. And some of these adaptation measurements or treatments are planning and assessment for flood risk reduction, the temporary protective measures, site and landscaping adaptations, protect utilities, dry and wet floodproofing. Fill the basement. I don't think that applies to too many places around here, but Don Cesar's got a basement. There may be others. Elevate the building on a new foundation. Elevate the interior structure. Abandon the lowest floor, or move the historic building. Purposes of the guidelines, as you can see through this diagram, is to reduce flood risk that's feasible and affordable and maintains the historic character. The use of these guidelines should only be applied to historic properties within an established risk of flooding area. Treatments that might not be considered in other contexts because of their impacts on the historic character of a property may be acceptable in the context of adapting the property to flooding hazards. And so what we're going to do at this point, I'm not going to go any farther with this presentation, because when you go to what you received, you're going to find that they're going to get into separate segments and things dealing with various measures of a building, like it could be many different things, even the landscaping, whether to elevate it or how much, or how to do it, how to maybe change the interior or exterior materials of the house. And it was Mike Clark's presentation on his house on Bell Vista last month that really sparked me to go back and look at these newly published guidelines and see that maybe we need to take a look at them. So from this point on in that publication, they have varying topics. And under these varying topics, they will then have some measurable standards to look at and to consider. And so we probably want to just take a look at this between now and the next time we meet. I'd like to do this in June, but if there's too much on the agenda, we can postpone it further out. But just to start getting into these things and thinking about how the board might want to recommend treating these historic properties and where we might want to go, how we might want to use these standards, which we are allowed to do. There may be. The NFIP does include provision that provides for relief of these historic buildings from certain floodplain requirements. The provision is applied at the discretion of the state or local governments and might not be available to all historic property owners. It's not designated, or I'm sorry, it's not designed to reduce flood risk or insurance rates. So the insurance rates, are not going to be accommodated or reduced. Provision for the historic buildings within the NFIP allows for alternative compliance when prescriptive flood code requirements would result in a project that does not meet the standards for rehabilitation. However, using this provision to avoid taking any steps to address or minimize the flood risk of a historic property is also not recommended. So at our next meeting, or next meeting where we have the time to start to get into this, we should do I believe that we should do a continued review of the guidelines on flood adaptation for rehabbing historic buildings, planning and assessment for the flood risk reduction. It might even be something that we might want to consider in a manner we've done before, where we would do televised workshop, where we would actually be seated and be going through some of these ideas and having more like round table type discussions. I don't know if that's a possibility or not, and we can let the city attorney can let us know if something like that might be possible.
A televised workshop? Is that what you're asking?
A round table portion of it, perhaps. Or maybe something eventually where the citizenry even could come in and be a participant of something like this. Not immediately, not a month or two, but as we start to look at these and see what might be feasible for St. Pete Beach.
It's a great question. Are you saying televised in that we all attend virtually? Because all of these meetings are televised, including workshops. Like they're all on
Our website, streaming.
That's true, but that might eliminate some public participation ability, but maybe we don't want to go there yet.
Okay.
But, at some point, we might want to get an idea of how the citizenry feels about it.
I think we can treat it similar how we're doing the floodplain management ordinance, where it's all like a town hall. So if people have questions, there is a panel that can answer some of those questions and then guide us to the direction the community wants.
Okay, that sounds good. And I think that that's it of the presentation so far. I just wanted to give you an overview of it. Look through that. Look to that publication. You've got all pages of it, and it's pretty in-depth, and it's pretty serious. But, there are ways that they're giving us ways that we can strengthen our historic properties and districts, and, really maybe find ways to make an impact on protecting these properties from serious flooding events.
Lynn, I think it would be really nice if we could maybe at some point, and this would be voluntary by a private property owner, maybe do a case study and investigate that particular property, see where some of these processes could benefit them, and calculate the cost for that. I think it'd be really informational for the public and for these building owners.
I could do the Warren Webster.
That's a great project.
Love that.
Lynn,
We're still
Lynn,
getting mold out of it, so,
I love that too. That's a great case study.
yeah.
My parents would probably also be willing participants. They've had water in their garage
Yeah.
the last couple of storms and lost all their plans.
This is what
I
it
love
looks
good
like,
case
and yeah.
studies, so.
Yeah,
Me
I
too.
agree.
I'm a big case study component.
Lynn, are you aware of any grants for private homeowners? Like there's the Florida by Safe Homes grant for wind mitigation. Are you aware of any state or federal grant programs for individual homeowners who've had, besides, I know that there's a grant for lifting your home, but I think you have had water intrusion at least twice in order to apply for the grant. Do you know if there's anything out there, any resources that are available?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I know that there are grants that can be applied for if you've had a severe or repetitive loss property. But it's not related to historic. I don't know of any that are specifically related to historic, but I can look into it and see, and I'm still working right now with Pinellas County and the University of Florida on this 3-phased study that they're doing. They're surveying number of properties in flood hazard areas that have experienced repeated flooding loss events. And this is from Dunedin to us and over to St. Pete and just, and Tarpon and, several other communities. And this is a 3-phased project, and this is the last phase. I'm sure that they're going to be making recommendations in their report, and I can contact them and ask them, because we meet about every 2 weeks virtually, and I can ask them, if they know of any funding for this sort of stuff. Other than the typical federal grants where, you have to have enough losses for it to be worth doing. And then, they're still not going to consider the historic preservation portion of it. That just is, for them, for the beds in that way with FEMA, is a non-starter.
Speaking of historic grants, why don't you give us an update?
I will be glad to do that.
This was
Segue.
really good information that you provided.
And I want us to start working through some of these things. When I was doing your presentations before, back in 2020, that it only come out in text. And they did not have anything really concrete with all of the kinds of things that they're showing now with the options. It was in the development stages. They didn't have pictures. They didn't have diagrams and charts and what have you that this now has. By 2021, we were done going over that stuff for a little while, and that's when the publication came out. But then, we were busy on lots of other things, and so we really never quite got to this. So I'm now squeezing it in a little bit. Our hurricane season is coming. So historic grants. We have a historic grant right now that is underway in the Bella Vista and Don Cesar Place neighborhoods. They are going to be surveying a minimum of 333 properties. And they've pretty well been chosen by mapping and ages. And so these are underway now. There was a little delay. It kind of got, Jen could probably explain this a little better than me, but basically it just was with what was happening late in the fall of this past year. It was just really difficult to get that started. But now it is underway. We have been given a 2-month extension to do this. And, hopefully our consultant feels that they will be able to finish up in that time period. Because we asked them how much additional time do you need, and they said about 2 months. So that should be done pretty soon. Later this summer.
What's the new deadline date?
Pardon me?
What's the extended deadline completion date on that?
It's 2 months from June 1st. Well, I'm sorry.
June 30th, I think.
That's when the consultant has to have it into us, but then we have to review it and then send it to the state by the end of June 30th. So the 2-month extension, is going to encompass that.
And do you have volunteers that you need for that, or do you need any more volunteers for that project?
I will ask. Now, in addition to that, you may recall that I applied for another historic grant for the Corey Avenue area. And I was taking, last year with our other grants, I think about the highest we ever scored was 36 on the list. And I felt that Corey was a really competitive grant. And after writing a few of these grants, I thought they were a decent grant. And we are 21 on the list, which is under the $1 million mark, and they usually have at least $2 million budgeted for the grant cycle. So we will know sometime late July, early August if we've gotten the grant. But given its ranking, I think that indicates
Chances are
a pretty
good.
good shot. And the review committee, I did give testimony over the phone back in August when the review committee was meeting and answered their questions, and they seemed to be pleased with the grant application. So I've now been okay to go ahead and start a new grant. So I'm taking a look at wrapping up Bella Vista because there are over 500 properties in Bella Vista that we need to survey or should be surveyed because they meet that age requirement. The University of Florida and Pinellas County exercise actually did, I think that they were close to 150 properties, maybe 153 in Bella Vista. For the Don Cesar and Bella Vista grant, we have to do all of the Don Cesar. That was stipulated by the state that we wrap up the Don Cesar area, and then with what we have left, up to the 333 mark, property mark, would be done with Bella Vista. But that's still going to leave us between 100 and 200 buildings in Bella Vista that need to be surveyed. It's, it's pretty. When I drove through there, I know I've said this to you before, to me it was an incredibly homogeneous neighborhood and just wonderful. It's a very little intrusion into it. and some wonderful, wonderful mid-century modern properties of varying types. So, I would like to do that as far as, finish up Bella Vista, maybe pick up there are a few pretty historic-looking properties on Vina Del Mar, and go to what's called, I think it's called North Beach up here, that's north of Corey. We just had we were going to have too many properties for the grant amount of money to do that North Beach area. But after I drove through it, I really felt that it was also ripe for surveying. So we can include that area as well and see how many we have left. And then, we definitely are going to do a certain number of buildings surveyed if we get the survey. 333 may sound like a magic number, but the amount that researchers charge or consultants charge to do the survey and the Florida Master Site File forms, write the report, is it runs a range of $100 to $200 per Florida Master Site File form that's done or property surveyed. 333 is that middle point. So that's why I was using the 333, so that we're not trying to lowball a consultant, but not give them the farm too. So the consultant we're doing now is that's fine with them as far as that dollar amount of money. Anything? I'm going to see if there's anything else. I think that yes, there is. 2 weeks ago, I had 2 historic researchers from Tallahassee came down. I got a call first, and they wanted to come down, and they were going to look at Treasure Island and maybe Madeira Beach, and they wanted to come here, and they wanted to look at our hotels. And so I went out with them a couple of Thursdays ago, and Samantha Schmidt was the lead historic preservationist, and although I did not get her last name, Elena was her assistant. And one of the things that they did was they wanted to go around and see the Corey area. And so we drove around the Corey area, not only Corey Avenue itself, but the little mom and pops that are over here to the east. And then we went across Gulf Boulevard, and where some of those mid-century condos or apartment buildings are with all the grill work. They were absolutely wild about those things. Thought they were fabulous and in excellent condition. And one of the things that they said to me was, they said 2 things. They felt that the neighborhood was ripe for Main Street, and they would be glad to give us some advice on how to maybe bring in Corey Avenue Business District to look towards the Main Street possibly.
I had wondered
The other
if
thing
you
they
made any
felt,
Main Street applications for that, or for 8th Avenue. I
well,
wondered if you'd made any Main Street applications for Corey or 8th Avenue.
I've not ever gotten any applications. I know Jennifer and I did talk to some folks about Corey, but that I think fell through. I'm not going to speak for Jen, but they did.
Yeah, there's a lot of requirements, and part of that is you actually have to have a Main Street manager. So whether it's on staff or, one of the businesses and their associations employ, and that's been our hang-up. I think we meet a lot of the other things, but it's getting the buy-in. I think when we talked to the Beach Theater owners, that came up quite a bit.
Now, another thing, and they were so excited about it, they felt that it had, I think I said, it was National Register possibilities. And the other thing that they looked at, because I had some time back, had requested an evaluation from them, I thought that our library was National Register eligible. And Samantha concurs. And she has sent me an application, which is the preliminary application for the state's review. And then she said a good point of that, it's city-owned, so it's, it's not in danger or anything like that, and it's been recently restored, which they loved, would be that it could be, if it, is on the National Register, sort of like the Don Cesar provided an impetus for historic survey work down south in Paso Grill, and further now with the Don Cesar Place neighborhood and Bella Vista, because it's got that anchor. And some of the times those things provide a good catalyst to spark people in a particular area. So just food for thought. And I know, Danielle, you also reached out to the state about putting the Keystone on the National Register. But, and this is something I really hadn't realized either, that is that because you are contributing, because the Keystone is a contributing property in a National Register district, it's already on the National Register. So you don't need, local landmark is fine, but you don't need to list yourself on the National Register because it's already on. On the other token, the Sable Palm Inn, which was the non-contributing building, because of the mansard roof, you couldn't see all of the, our historic architecture that is actually, the roof line is still under that mansard roof because it's just like a fence around the rooftop. But I also told the researchers that for the Sable Inn, the major reason why it got in was local landmark, was not that it was so architecturally lovely, but its contribution to the history of Paso Grill and its involvement in Paso Grill since the mid-1920s. Bringing tourism in and all of that, which are all parts of, why a property could be locally landmarked. But when the researchers did the historic survey of Paso Grill, there's not really a lot of time to do much more than look at the architecture. You will find some stories and some significance, but many times you don't. When you're doing a survey, if you're doing hundreds of properties, there's not a whole lot of time to do much research on them. So anyway, what the property owner can do, and I will be contacting him shortly, is got a form for him to fill out if he's interested to now send in a request to the state to change his non-contributing status to a contributing status because it's now been locally landmarked, and the reasons for that. And that's pretty much going to be contained in the staff report. So that was also interesting to me as well, that just because we locally landmark something, if it's non-contributing, it's not going to automatically be contributing. That has to be done at the state and national level. Any questions or comments?
Just thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. And next month, read up, but depending on what we do with the Paso Grill guidelines, we may not want to get into any kind of lengthy discussion, maybe push that on to July. We do have a COA to look at next month as well.
Yeah.
So
Depending on the workshop, maybe even August.
that could be.
Less homework.
Yeah.
As long as there's not a test, though. Okay.
Oh, there will be.
No math.
Thank you, Lynn. Very thorough, very informative. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, so now I think we're to 5D, mixed-use redevelopment along 8th Avenue. Brandon?
Yeah, just real quick with this one. We received a request or just a general question about redevelopment of a single-family residence that exists behind a commercial structure on 8th Avenue. I know that narrows it down. They are looking at rebuilding just the residence, not the commercial single-story structure out front. I wanted to bring this to the board because it isn't crystal clear in our code whether redevelopment of the residence alone is permitted. And I want to, if we could pull up the overhead. So 8th Avenue, of course, is a mixed-use district, and residential, which is 40.2A, is permitted. However, it's allowed as a component of a vertically mixed-use development. And then reading down to 40.4, which is allowable conditional uses and structures. I know this was brought up earlier. Single-family homes are only permitted when they are historically designated in the 8th Avenue district, and this structure, both the commercial portion and the residence itself, is currently a local landmark. The interest is in redeveloping the residential portion of the structure only, and I just wanted to get the board's general feedback on this. Of course, we've been talking a lot about height and just redevelopment in 8th Avenue recently. I wanted to get your thoughts generally on whether this is something that the board may like to see. Of course, it would come before you either as a certificate of appropriateness for demolition for the residence itself, or if it comes forward after the amended 8th Avenue district goes into effect, you would see the design review as well if this were to take place. But I just wanted to get the board's thoughts in terms of, instead of having the typical mixed-use development, which is having the commercial at the ground floor, residences directly above it, would you consider redevelopment, especially along 8th Avenue, that is more of a horizontal mix, or would you like to see a from the ground up vertical redevelopment?
So, am I understanding that this term reconstruction in 5D means demolition of an existing building and constructing a new building?
Correct, yes.
So that new building would no longer be a historic structure,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Be sure I understand that. Reconstruction doesn't mean fixing, that means knocking it down and building something new.
Yes, and I didn't want to get too in depth on the actual consideration itself, this specific property. It will come forward to you in some way or another. I just wanted to talk more generally in terms of the very limited properties on 8th Avenue that could possibly accommodate a horizontal mix in the future, if that's something the board would consider.
Well, it strikes me because I think there's only one property that fits that description right now, so I'm pretty sure I know what it is and where it is. And that's been there for 80 years probably. I'm just guessing. I mean, it's there a long time, way before we had zones and codes and all that kind of stuff, I think. And, you know, some of those places along there have residences built above the ground floor, and some have built on the back. At least one other one I can think of that's actually on the ground floor, but it's in the back of the first floor, essentially. There's really not a lot of room for property for the, you know, I mean, what we're not talking about is they clearly couldn't knock down an existing structure and build a house there.
Correct.
That's clearly, you know, forbidden. I mean, we know there was the one house that was moved there, which there's a specific provision that allows an historic home to be moved, you know, with all the different things to be moved onto those properties. So I guess you could knock a property down and move a house onto it that was historic. But it seems like, you know, this, maybe our code didn't cover this specific situation because there's so few representatives of it, okay? However, the way the CRD is set up, which includes the whole south side of 9th that's vacant right now, you know, that still includes, you can't have a single family residence, so I guess it wouldn't make a difference on new stuff. Are they talking about, though, tearing it down and building a new structure, or we just want to have a discussion about, or just remodeling the existing historic home that already exists?
No, it would be a complete tear down and redevelopment of only the residential portion of the property. They would not be touching the commercial side, but they would be constructing a residence behind the commercial.
Where residence already exists.
Correct.
That's historic.
Yes.
So they would be talking about building a brand new structure in the CRD, but it's just happened to be behind a commercial structure.
Which
Correct.
of course have to be elevated. And
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that set of facts, I mean, I mean, I can see how they could take that structure and do remodeling to it, and maybe even add a floor to it or whatever, I don't know, because that would be, under the conditions of how you would redo a historic house, right? But to knock something down and build a whole new structure, which would have to have a whole, extra floor, then potentially you would have a one-story commercial structure with a three-story brand-new house sticking up the top of it in the back, right?
Correct. And of course, if it's structurally sound, they could add the 2 stories on top of the commercial structure as it stands today, or they could connect it in a way that they might need to flood-proof the commercial portion of the building, but they could potentially connect it and still have the stories above, but at the back of the structure instead of at the front. This, as they've presented it so far, would be a detached structure, but they still have ways of making it work within the more direct interpretation of the code. This would be they are, as far as I understand, proposing a detached structure, however.
So can you go to the overhead real quick?
Sure.
If you don't mind.
Could you make that a little bit bigger? Is that possible?
Zoom in, Ryan or whoever's back there. Amy? Jamie, thank you.
I mean, we actually have it in our,
Yeah, we have this already.
Yeah, but so your question is, would they prefer horizontal as opposed to vertical?
Or just have it as an option if horizontal mixes. And the reason I bring this up is because there are zoning districts in the city that do specifically say that horizontal mixes are allowed. We have one that specifically says it is not permitted, it has to be vertical. And then we have a few like 8th Avenue where it's not as clear. Given that these cases are going to be coming forward to the board in some way or another.
right.
I wanted to get your
Well,
thoughts.
here's a question I would have. I mean, I would just, my first blush would say it should just be vertical and not horizontal, because that makes the most sense, because most of those commercial structures take up the whole lot. So what would you do, how would you determine the setbacks on the house behind the commercial spot? You follow what I'm saying? I mean, it's already that particular location we're talking about, or even some of the buildings, a building next to it, they park cars behind it, so you could see how they could add on into the back of some of those structures. But, how would you determine a lot? You'd have to be used like I don't know how that works, the mixed use, because the front part is up to the sidewalk all the way to each property line on the back. So then you've got this area in the back.
Well, the front
Setbacks, how could they even build anything of any size?
Well, the front is compliant with the front yard setback or the build to line. They would need to comply with the side setbacks in the rear. They're significantly reduced on 8th Avenue compared to other properties, so they can take up most of the lot. I think it would be viable. There's going to be probably a larger setback than what's there currently between the residence and the commercial because of fire and building codes, but they would be able to build at the back part of the lot.
They would, you think?
They would, yes.
So my feeling on this is a brand new detached building. It's neither vertical nor horizontal mixed use. It's a separate use. I don't think it would really qualify as a mixed use building if it's not attached to the same building. It's a completely separate.
Okay.
And it would be new construction of a single-family home, correct?
It would, yes.
So, which is not allowed, in no case shall a new construction, single-family home be allowed.
I mean, but a way to skin that cat, like you said, is they could just build 2 extra floors on top of the commercial place in front.
Correct, or have some kind of a connection, a horizontal
Right.
connection.
Build onto the back and have it go attach to the front. Well, they'd still have in the back that they'd have to, this is a little bit further afield, but if you wanted to take one of those single-story buildings, it's just a commercial floor, and wanted to put a residence on top of it, which you could do, in the back of that, would it have to be FEMA compliant?
At that point, I think they would need to make the whole structure FEMA compliant if they could do it in a way that doesn't substantially improve the structure, but I can't see that being viable with multiple stories of.
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying is when we take a historical structure and we allow them to, I guess the question would be, a historical structure that exists now that only has 1 story on 8th Avenue, could they put a second floor on it as a residence? as long as it fit into the CRD, which I would say it would, right? Because they can build a house, they can build a place now that's has a ground floor of commercial and a second and third floor of residential. So why couldn't they take that as historical one story and just add on top of it?
They could with the certificate of appropriateness. I think generally speaking, there's some depth to the lot, and this helps, but generally speaking, adding on multiple stories to a single story structure is usually not promoted.
But yeah, I mean, I can see how it makes it extremely difficult and certainly a lot more expensive than just building something in the back. But, yeah, I don't know. I just think I have to agree with what Tia and Holly had basically said, that, you know, if you really break it down, it does seem like they're just building a new single home, which is prohibited, and I think that's the spirit of what this is. If they wanted to reconstruct or redo what they already have, then I don't see any kind of issue with that, and I think that would be allowable to come through as a historic structure, that they, you know, wouldn't have to become FEMA compliant or do anything like that.
And that would be specifically for a renovation or a remodel. Would everybody be comfortable with that in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about speaking for everybody else, but I think that's a good thing, because it's still gonna look historic, and it's been there, and we allow people on the regular parts of Pasco to do it, so why wouldn't we, you know, I mean, that's the spirit of the thing. But that would also discourage other properties that could potentially have along there that have some space in the back from building a whole new structure, because that could be a problem. And I don't think that fits into the spirit of what we've got going on there. The idea really is supposed to be that the CRD is a main street for businesses. And there's specific, you know, with the one house was moved on, but other than that one house, every structure is essentially a business structure, at least on the ground floor. So, anybody else got anything else?
I would agree.
Agreement.
Okay. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else that we had to talk about? I think
Yeah, we have 2 items under number 7.
next meeting, June 7th.
June 6th.
June 6th, excuse me, I was thinking of, I don't know, I wasn't thinking of D-Day, I guess,
And
right?
then just for the record, can we confirm the July meeting date, since our regular meeting date would be July 4th? I know we have it in our notes, but just so we have it in our minutes. And
It's on the website, on the historic page. I can look real quick. It is scheduled for July 11th.
I thought we went over that when we got the schedule.
we did, but I just wanted it back to the forefront, so everybody who's reading this knows what we're doing over the summer. when
Okay.
we're making our workshop dates, et cetera.
And then I want to add one more thing, which, because we don't have enough homework from Lynn and everybody else. But I was doing just some research as far as, you know, preparation and looking at what's going on in the city and all of the changes and the waves of growth and all of that. And I found something down in Marion County that I thought was really interesting, not to add an additional ordinance or anything, but they have something called a rate of growth ordinance. So it might be something just to read and look into, but I started looking into it and delving into it, and I thought it was really interesting. And their main focus of having that rate of growth ordinance, and they call it a ROGO, is to make sure that everybody is able to, you know, evacuate should there be a hurricane, if there's infrastructure issues, if there anything really, just to make sure that the people that are already present are protected and that the growth that's happening is sustainable and responsible.
Do you mind emailing that to me?
I would be
I
delighted.
think it means that the originals get off the beach first, and the new people have to wait till the end.
We'll send them a tow line.
Danielle, I was down in the Keys at a conference, and the emergency manager for the whole Monroe County was just one of our speakers, and he just talked about a lot of the difficulties they have there, and that being one of them. But there's a lot of stubborn people, like there is on this coast, that don't evacuate. And then their other big problem is they have so many people, because it's so expensive to live there, that live on their boats, and they don't leave either. And then once the boats wash ashore and are on land, it's no longer the boat owner's problem, it's the cities or the counties. Yeah.
And Interesting.
So they have a lot
And it
going
makes
on there.
sense.
So,
Monroe County is a very interesting.
Yeah. I was down there and I noticed that they're building all those, almost look like containers on top of each
Yep.
other. And you can
The
park
shipping
your, like,
containers?
well, yeah, and you can like put your RV underneath it as well. But they're just
cool.
these little 10-foot wide structures.
And the vacant lots from all the storms. And I want to correct myself because I think I said Marion County and I meant Monroe County.
I figured you meant
Oh,
Monroe.
I did
Okay.
Monroe
I'd
County.
be looking in
That's my error.
Marion County.
My apologies.
No worries. I will take the email. Yeah, Monroe County, they have a lot of specific laws though,
Yeah.
just
it's-
because of how they're situated. It's a very, very technical county, cities, all sorts of things.
yeah.
State gets involved
I
a
think
lot.
this whole state is, the rate of growth is huge. They were talking,
Yeah.
the people in the airport, because the airport they're adding on to, because so many are coming in and going out, more airlines.
They just cut back, I know, on their cruises because their cruises got out of control. So that was a big vote down there. But
Yeah.
anyway, just more fun.
We all have our problems.
Good stuff.
Okay.
More to read.
It's still 10 to 11.
That's
We
right.
did a good- we did a
that was
good
fa-
job.
Actually, it wasn't
Been
too bad.
10 seconds.
2 hours and 20 minutes. Pretty good. Okay, adjourn.